The night had settled heavy over the small town, a silence so deep that even the insects seemed reluctant to disturb it. Wooden houses lined the narrow street, their paint faded by years of sun and rain, their porches empty, their windows dark. It was the kind of night where every sound carried far, where secrets could not hide, and where the weight of a whisper might travel across fences and fields. Inside one of those houses, a young woman named Amica sat awake. She was 19, dressed in a light cotton nightgown, her hair falling loosely across her shoulders. The room around her was small, its walls painted a tired cream, its air scented faintly of lavender and old wood. A Bible rested untouched on her dresser, its leather cover cracked with age. A single lamp flickered weakly at her bedside, its light fighting against the shadows that clung to every corner. Outside her window, the moon cast a silver glow through. The thin curtains, painting her figure in pale light, Amica's heart pounded violently in her chest. She pressed her hands against the blanket, clutching it as though it might shield her from what was coming. For weeks she had dreamt of this night. For years she had imagined what it would be like to finally give herself to Chindu, the boy who had captured her heart in ways she could never quite explain. And yet, sitting there with the moon as her only witness, she found herself trembling. She whispered softly into the emptiness of her room, as though trying to reason with herself. "Why am I so nervous? I've wanted this. I thought I was ready, so why am I so afraid?" Her words barely filled the space, carried away almost immediately by the silence. A sound broke the stillness. The faint creak of a door, opening somewhere below. Her body stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. She strained her ears, and there it was again, the soft press of footsteps on the old wooden floor, slow and deliberate, climbing the stairs one by one. She knew it was him. Her heart began to race, so loud in her chest she thought the whole house might hear it. She turned toward the door, her fingers digging into the blanket, waiting. The door opened, slowly, carefully. And then he was there, Chindu. He stepped inside, tall, his frame catching the glow of the lamp and the sliver of moonlight. At 21, he still carried the rawness of youth, but there was something about him that felt older, something heavy. That clung to him like a shadow. His skin, warmed by the sun, contrasted against the pale walls. His dark eyes searched the room, settling on Amica with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. He wore simple jeans and a plain white shirt, but in his hand he carried a charm, small, wrapped in worn leather, a token that seemed to hum with its own strange energy. "Amica," he whispered, his voice low, careful, almost afraid of breaking the silence that had thickened between them. His breath trembled as though he too fought against fear, though his eyes burned with hope. She stared at him, her lips parting slightly, her voice breaking as she spoke. "You came." It was not a question, but the words carried disbelief, as if she could hardly trust her own eyes. He closed the door behind him with gentle hands, the faint click echoing in the small room. He took a single step forward, then stopped, his gaze never leaving hers. The charm dangled from his fingers, catching the lamp's glow. "I had to," he said softly, his tone raw. "I've waited too long to see you like this. I couldn't. Stay away." Amica's body trembled, her heart pulling her forward while her mind dragged her back. She wanted him there, yet fear coiled tightly in her chest. She could not explain it, not even to herself. Her breath came in sharp bursts as she clutched at the fabric of her NIGHT OWN. Suddenly, she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The lamplight flickered as if startled, casting restless shadows across the wooden walls. Her wide eyes reflected, both desire and terror, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Chindu, I don't know if I can do this." Her words cut through him like a blade. His shoulders tensed, his step faltered, but then he moved closer, falling to his knees beside. The bed, the charm slipped from his hand, dangling helplessly as he reached out for her trembling fingers. His face, illuminated by the lamp's unsteady glow, carried a sorrow that seemed too deep for his years. His eyes shone, wet with desperation. "Amica, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. "I love you. I've loved you longer than I can remember. I swear, I will not hurt you. I'll be gentle. I'll take it slow. Just trust me." His words spilled out like a prayer, raw and urgent. His head bowed as though begging not only her, but the universe itself to grant him this moment. Amica's chest rose and fell quickly, her breath unsteady, her tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. She looked down at him, this boy who seemed both fragile and fierce, this boy she had dreamed of, but suddenly did not recognize. Her voice came out broken, a whisper that barely reached him. "Chindu, I'm scared. I don't know if I can." Her words trembled in the air, fragile, delicate, and heavy all at once. The silence that followed pressed in from every direction, broken only by the uneven rhythm of their breaths. Chindu closed his eyes briefly, his face twisted in anguish. He wanted to protect her, to comfort her, but his desire waged war against his patience. He reached for her cheek, brushing his fingers against her skin, but the touch only deepened her trembling. The tension snapped. Amica screamed. The sound tore from her throat like fire, wild and uncontrollable. It ripped through the room, piercing and raw, shattering the silence that had held the night captive. The oil lamp rattled on the knitstand, its flame quivering as though frightened. Amica's hair whipped across her face as her body recoiled, her eyes wide with terror. Her scream carried beyond the walls of her room, beyond the wooden shell of the house. It leapt into the cold night air, echoing through the quiet streets of the town. Dogs barked in the distance. A window creaked open, and then another. Lights flickered on, doors opened, voices rose. The town was awake. Wooden porches groaned under. The weight of neighbors stepping out, flashlights in hand, faces etched with confusion and worry. Jackets were pulled hastily over pajamas, boots slipped onto tired feet. The street filled slowly with people, their beams of light cutting through the darkness, their whispers colliding in the air. "Did you hear that?" one asked, her voice tight, a scream. "From Mayo's place," another replied, his face pale under the starlight. "What's going on in there?" The peace of the night had been shattered, and from every corner of the small town, curiosity, fear, and judgment began to gather. The sound of hurried footsteps grew louder outside, echoing across the front yard. Mayo, Amica's father, stormed out of his house with the force of a man driven by anger and fear. He was 50, tall and broad-shouldered, his plaid shirt half-tucked into worn jeans. A heavy flashlight bounced in his fist, its beam slicing the darkness with furious precision. His face was twisted with rage, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes searching for the source of his daughter's scream. Behind him, neighbors followed, their flashlights casting wild beams across the lawn, their faces painted with worry, suspicion, and judgment. The crowd moved quickly toward Mayo's front porch, voices overlapping in a storm of questions. "What happened? Did you hear her scream? Is she hurt? What's going on in there, Mayo?" He didn't answer. He didn't even slow down. He marched across the wooden porch of his house, his boots striking against the boards with the weight of a man carrying both fury and dread. Inside, the house was silent now, but the silence felt dangerous. Upstairs, Amica sat trembling on her bed, her hands clutching the blanket tightly against her chest, her breath uneven. Chindu stood frozen near the door, the lamplight casting long, unsteady shadows across his face. His body was rigid, his hands half raised in helplessness, his eyes darting between Amica and the muffled roar of approaching voices outside. The room felt smaller with every heartbeat, the walls pressing in, the air suffocating. Then came the pounding, a violent, earth-shaking thud against the wooden front door. Mayo's fist crashed against it again and again, his voice booming through the house like thunder. "Amica! Amica! Open this door!" His flashlight beam cut through the small cracks, searching desperately, his anger vibrating through every word. The neighbors clustered behind him, their voices rising in anxious murmurs, their faces lit by the glow of flashlights and the single porch light that flickered weakly above them. Chindu's body stiffened, his chest heaving. He glanced back at Amica, his lips parting as if to speak, but the words caught in his throat. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking in a whisper. "You have to go. They'll kill you if they find you here." But it was too late. The door burst open with a deafening crack, the wooden frame splintering as Mayo charged inside, his flashlight blazing a path through the darkness. His eyes locked onto the figure standing in his daughter's room. Chindu, caught in the lamplight, his face illuminated in stark relief. Rage twisted Mayo's expression, his breathing heavy and ragged. The neighbors pressed against the doorway, their faces a mix of shock, judgment, and whispered scandal. The tension in the air was suffocating. Amica's sobs filled the silence as she sat upright on the bed, her body trembling, but her eyes locked on the scene unfolding before her. Chindu took a step back, his chest rising and falling in rapid, panicked breaths. Mayo's flashlight beam cut across his face, sharp and unforgiving, highlighting every line of fear and desperation etched into his expression. "You!" Mayo roared, his voice carrying like a storm. His arm shook as he leveled the flashlight at Chindu, as though it were a weapon. "What are you doing in my house, with my daughter?" The words came in a growl, filled with both rage and sorrow, as though betrayal and heartbreak shared the same breath. Before Chindu could speak, before Amica could rise to defend him, a figure stepped forward through the crowd gathered at the doorway. It was Grandma Waco, a woman of 70, wrapped in a cardigan, leaning on her cane. Her face was calm, carved with the wisdom of decades, her eyes steady in the storm of emotions that filled the house. She raised one hand slowly, her presence commanding silence. The murmurs of the neighbors faded, the air shifting as if the night itself held its breath. "Enough," she said softly, her voice steady and strong. It was not loud, but it cut through the chaos like a bell in a quiet chapel. Her gaze moved, from Mayo to Chindu, and then to Amica, trembling but slowly lifting her head, courage flickering through her fear. Amica's lips parted, her voice weak but resolute. "Please, listen." She sat upright on the bed, her trembling hands pressed against the blanket, her eyes darting between her father and the crowd. The lamplight softened her face, casting her in fragile courage. "He didn't hurt me. He didn't force me. I was just afraid. But he didn't do anything." The room fell into silence again, save for the sound of Amica's unsteady breathing. Mayo's jaw clenched, his flashlight beam still fixed on Chindu's face, his fury restrained only by the weight of Grandma Waco's gaze. The neighbors lingered. At the doorway, their judgmental stares piercing, their whispers coiling in the air like smoke. Grandma Waco leaned forward on her cane, her voice calm but edged with authority. "This is not for all of you to decide tonight. Let the girl speak. Let the boy explain. Do not turn your fear into a fire that burns them both." Her words carried the kind of weight that silenced even the most eager gossips, the kind of wisdom That reminded everyone of their humanity, but Mayo's anger had not subsided. He turned his glare onto Chindu, his voice sharp and heavy. "You will answer me, boy. What are you doing in my daughter's room in the middle of the night?" Chindu swallowed hard, his throat dry, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. His voice cracked as he spoke, quiet but firm. "I came because I love her. I came because I wanted her to know it. But I swear to you, I did not touch her. I would never hurt her." His words hung heavy in the air, weighted by sincerity and desperation. The neighbors exchanged glances, their whispers rising again, some filled with doubt, others with curiosity, a few with sympathy. Mayo's eyes burned with distrust, but something in Chindu's trembling voice, something in Amica's tear-streaked face, made his anger waver. For a long moment, no one moved. The house seemed to exist outside of time, trapped in the collision of love, fear, judgment, and the fragile threads of truth. The wooden door crashed open with a violent crack. Mayo's heavy boots struck the floor as he stormed inside, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark room. His face was red with rage, his breath sharp and heavy. Behind him, neighbors crowded. In the doorway, their flashlights spilling white beams across the wooden walls. Amica flinched on the bed, pulling the blanket tighter around her trembling body. Chindu stood stiff, caught in the glare of Mayo's light, his chest rising and falling quickly. The room was thick with fear, whispers from the crowd filling the air like smoke. "You," Mayo's voice thundered. "What are you doing in my house with my daughter?" His hand trembled with fury, but his eyes also carried something deeper, fear for the girl sitting weak and pale on the bed. Before anyone else could speak, a soft but firm voice cut through the tension. Grandma Waco, leaning on her cane, stepped to the front of the porch. Her cardigan swayed gently in the night breeze, her eyes steady with the wisdom of years. She raised her hand, silencing the crowd. "Let us not judge in anger," she said. "First, we must hear from the girl herself." All eyes turned to Amica. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she pushed herself upright. Her voice was faint but clear. "Father, nothing happened. I was only afraid. Chindu didn't hurt me. He didn't force me. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and her eyes flicked to Chindu, who stood silent, guilt written across his face. The crowd murmured, some skeptical, some sympathetic. Mayo's jaw tightened, his chest heaving. He turned to Chindu, his voice sharp as a whip. "You knew better. You were trusted. And now my daughter has been dragged into shame." Chindu stepped forward, his voice cracking with emotion. "I swear to you, sir, I never wanted to harm her. I love Amica. I only wanted her to know it, but I see now I was wrong. I should have respected her fear." Silence stretched in the room, heavy and suffocating. Then Grandma Waco spoke again, her tone carrying both strength and compassion. "They are young. They are foolish. But let us not destroy 2 lives in one night of fear. Let them learn, let them prove themselves." The words hung in the air, and slowly Mayo's anger softened, though his face remained stern. He lowered a flashlight, his voice a low growl. "Very well. But listen to me, Chindu. You will earn my forgiveness. You will prove that you are worthy of my daughter. If you fail, I will see to it that you face the consequences myself." The neighbors began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, their flashlights bobbing as they returned to their homes. The tension in the air eased, though whispers of scandal still clung to the night. Grandma Waco gently guided Amica from the bed, her hand soft on the girl's shoulder. "Come, child," she whispered. "This night does not end in shame, but in understanding." Chindu remained in the doorway, his heart heavy but resolute. He watched Amica leave with her grandmother, her steps slow and uncertain, her face pale in the lamplight. He knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of a journey where he would have to fight not with force, but with patience, respect, and love. And as the first light of dawn crept across the sky, Chindu stood alone in the silence of the house, realizing his true test had only just begun. The days after that night were heavy with silence. Amica stayed in her father's house, the walls of the small town home both a comfort and a cage. Neighbors whispered when she passed by. Their eyes carried judgment that cut deeper than words. Still, she held her head high, though her heart ached with confusion. She loved Chindu, yet fear from that night lingered like a shadow. Grandma Waco often visited, her cane tapping softly on the wooden porch. She would sit beside Amica on the old swing, speaking in her calm, wise voice. "Child, love is not rushed. It grows with patience. Learn who you are, and don't let fear silence you." Amica listened, her eyes lowered, but her heart slowly absorbed the elder's words. Meanwhile, Chindu faced Mayo's test. The man who had stormed into the house that night now demanded proof, not through words, but through action. "If you claim to love my daughter," Mayo had said, his voice sharp, "then prove it to me. Show me you are worthy, not just with desire, but with work, with respect." From that day, Chindu worked tirelessly in the small town. At sunrise, he labored to rebuild the broken fences along the farmlands. At noon, he carried buckets of water to aid families during a short drought. By evening, he could be found repairing the town's old well, his hands blistered, his shirt stained with sweat and dirt. Neighbors who had once looked at him with suspicion now watched with quiet curiosity. Some softened, nodding at his efforts. Others still muttered doubts, but none could deny his perseverance. Amica watched from a distance. Each time she saw him, her heart shifted a little more. His determination was not for pride, not for reputation, but for her. Slowly, her fear began to loosen its grip, replaced by a fragile trust. As the sun painted the horizon with shades of gold and crimson, Chindu walked to Mayo's house, carrying a simple basket of groceries, fresh yams, apples, and bread he had earned with his own hands. He stood tall but humble at the doorstep, waiting. When Mayo opened the door, his eyes scanned the young man with his stern, unreadable gaze. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with a grunt, Mayo stepped aside. "Come inside. Tonight, you'll share a meal with us." The dining table was modest, the wooden chairs creaking as the family sat together. Mayo sat at the head, his presence heavy. Amica sat across from Chindu, her eyes meeting his briefly, a quiet spark passing between them. Throughout the meal, Mayo spoke little, only watching, weighing every gesture, every word dotted last. After the plates were cleared, Mayo leaned back, folding his arms. His voice was firm, but calmer than before. "You have shown patience. You've worked for this town, and I cannot deny what I see. But hear me, Chindu. Love is not just fire. It is sacrifice. It is listening. If you truly wish to stand beside my daughter, you must honor her voice as if it were your own." Chindu bowed his head, his voice steady. "I understand, sir. I don't only want her hand. I want to grow with her, to earn her trust, to love her in the right way." That night, after dinner, Amica and Chindu walked together by the riverbank under a sky full of stars. The water shimmered with silver reflections, the cool breeze carrying the scent of pine and soil. For a while, they walked in silence, only their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Finally, Amica spoke, her voice soft but sure. "I was afraid." "Before," she admitted, her hand brushing against his. "But I see you now, your heart, your spirit. I know we can be together when the time is right." Chindu stopped, turning to her, his dark eyes shimmering with emotion. He took her hand gently, his voice low but filled with promise. "I will wait, Amica, no matter how long, because you are worth it." And under the vast sky of small town America, with the river flowing quietly beside them, the two young souls stood hand in hand, no longer bound by fear or judgment, but by patience, respect, and a love that had begun to endure. Seasons shifted in the small town. The trees shed their leaves, then bloomed again, marking the slow passage of time. With every month that passed, Chindu continued his quiet labor. He helped repair barns after storms, lifted heavy beams during town gatherings, and carried firewood to widows' homes. People began to greet him with nods instead of whispers. Suspicion gave way to reluctant respect. Amica, too, had changed. The fear from that night still lingered at the edges of her memory, but it no longer defined her. With Grandma Waco's guidance, she learned to speak her thoughts without shame. "Love is not silence, child," the elder often reminded her. "It is a voice, yours and his, together." Slowly, Amica's courage grew. Her heart no longer weighed down by guilt, but opening to trust. One evening, Mayo stood at the edge of his porch, watching Chindu work in the fields. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. For months he had tested the young man, pushing him to prove his worth. And though his heart still guarded his daughter fiercely, even Mayo could not deny what he had seen. Chindu's devotion was not a passing flame. It was steady, patient, and real. That night, he called Amica and Chindu to sit with him. The air inside the wooden house was heavy, the lamplight casting long shadows across the walls. "I have watched," Mayo said, his voice slow and deliberate. "And though I will never forget the fear of that night, I see now that you, Chindu, are not here to take. You are here to give." His eyes softened just slightly. "If my daughter accepts you, then I will not stand in the way." Amica's breath caught, her eyes filling with quiet relief. Chindu bowed his head deeply, his voice steady but emotional. "Thank you, sir. I promise you I will honor her, not only as the woman I love, but as the voice I must always hear." Days later, under the wide summer sky, the town gathered by the river for a festival. Lanterns glowed, children ran across the grass, and music floated through the warm evening air. Among the crowd, Amica and Chindu walked side by side, there, hands brushing, then intertwining. The whispers of scandal were gone now, replaced by nods of approval, smiles of neighbors who had watched their journey. Grandma Waco, sitting on a wooden bench, tapped her cane and smiled knowingly. "Patience, respect, and love," she murmured, watching them. "That is the story they will carry forward." As the stars appeared above, Amica leaned her head against Chindu's shoulder. "We've come a long way," she whispered. Chindu squeezed her hand gently, his eyes lifting to the heavens. "And we'll go farther still, because we've learned to wait, to listen, and to walk together." The river shimmered beneath the moonlight, reflecting their faces side by side. No longer haunted by fear, no longer judged by whispers, there, love had found its shape, strong, patient, enduring. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of a small-town night, Amica and Chindu's story transformed from scandal into a tale of hope, one that would live on, not in shame, but in the memory of a community that had learned to forgive, to grow, and to believe in love again.